good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Come on in and grab a seat.
Or two.
You had to get here early to get a seat and back, so that's right. My name is Steve Williamson from Trinity Technology Group. We're one of the vendor sponsors. But this show is all about you and our panelists who are from various state agencies. I want to introduce them first, and then let's see if I can do this. Here we go. So Deepa Pochiraju from the Department of Healthcare Services, who's the project director for the Managed Care Payment System. She's now responsible for getting 7 million beneficiaries paid each month for 120 odd health plans in the Medi-Cal program. Tim Garza, larger than life, CIO, Department of Water Resources, IT Director for the Resources Agency. All right. And then Russ Nichols, there he is. Russ Nichols is the Project Director for the Statewide Offender Management System, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And then finally, Eric Steen, who's the Project Director for whatever it is that acronym stands for. No, it's right. I wrote it down, Centralized Revenue Opportunity System, CROSS, at the Board of Equalization. So, and we're very fortunate that Tim is going to participate on both our panels today, so we'll have a little bit of continuity. Now this afternoon, we have another set of panelists. All right, so all of you are coming back for this afternoon as well, because it's entirely different content this afternoon, right? We all know that, right? And it's going to be, what's going to be interesting about that is this morning we're talking about what the business analyst does, how one becomes an analyst, how organizations can organize and train their analysts, and how they participate on projects. This afternoon, they're going to introduce some of the kinds of tools that can be used by the analysts on projects. So the two sessions do complement each other. If we get a quick show of hands, who here currently has or has recently participated as a business analyst on an automation project? Okay. And how about on a non-automation project, kind of a management services specialist, strike force team, go in and figure out how do we improve this business process in my organization? Have you been on those kind of strike forces? Hey, Randy. Well, after today, you'll be qualified to do that. So we want to jump right into it.
You're not giving away certificates, are you?
You'd be in trouble, huh?
Continuing education units. So I'm going to ask Deepa to launch us off first. And Deepa, say a little bit more, please, than what I just did about what your project is and what you do currently over at Healthcare Services, because you've got the largest system that no one's ever heard of, is what I'd like to say.
Hello, everyone. I would like to start this session with an example, a real-world situation that we faced with a few months ago, to make you realize something very, very important. So we have this project, we have this system that went live like 3 years ago. This system generates invoices, and these payments go out to the health plans. And the invoices were designed, the format of the invoice was designed like 3 years ago, and now we're dealing with all the change requests that are coming to us. So in one of the, it's a medium change request, it's an enhancement to the system. We are in a chat session. A team of business analysts from the vendor team is there running the chat session, and the users are two different groups. One is the program side, the managed care program staff, and the other is accounting, who processes the invoices. All of a sudden, we realized that one term meant two different things to those two groups. We didn't realize that all along, 3 years, and much more came out of that. Not just that one term, many other things that are currently on the invoice meant two different things. to the two groups. What do you think is missing here? Anyone from the group? A business analyst with the domain knowledge. A business analyst who knows both managed care policy or program or processes and accounting side on how their day-to-day activity goes. Are you able to hear me? Okay. So that is the importance of business analyst on any project. And let's go through all the tasks that a business analyst can be part of in any IT project. And it starts with feasibility study. I think business analysts should be part of the project from that phase on. Feasibility study report to start with. And then it can go to BCPs, it can go to advanced planning documents like state. If you are entitled for federal funding, you have to submit an APD to the feds. So those documents, they are all related to the project. And then comes the RFO, RFP, where the requirements are there. And to develop an RFP, the business analyst should be gathering everyone, all related parties together to get those high-level requirements in there. We may not know entirely what we want, but we know how it should look like, definitely. And vendor comes in after that to fill in those gaps. And business analysts from the state side definitely bridge that gap and help the vendors fill those gaps and come up with a very detailed set of requirements. So then comes the JAT sessions. After the vendor is on board, they start with the JAT sessions, gathering the requirements. Business analysts are part of all of this. And then the design phase, once we have the requirements and they are into documentation, how the requirements are documented, how the business rules are elicited from these sessions, everything needs to go into a documentation for everyone to refer to and the system to be built from. And after that comes the system design phase. And it's not just developers in there, and that's the basic mistake that most of the projects do, to just have the developers take care of the design, talking to the business analysts and they take care of the design, but that's not how it should be. Business analysts should be part of the design sessions where the database is being designed, where the orchestrations are being designed. You know, they have to tie to the business processes that are defined in the business requirements and the system requirements documents and functional requirements documents. Everything should tie into the design. So later on, if anyone is looking at the code, they should know what business process is being handled in that piece of code. That's how it should tie together. And after that comes the testing phase. Once it's all developed, the testing phase starts. Business analysts are key to the testing, and they will have that exposure to testing as well. It's not just analysis. Most of the time people think business analysis or analyst role ends with the business analysis, but that's not true. They should be part of testing, because they have that background of what should be the input and what should be the output. If they have the proper tools and the training for those tools, I think they can be the best testers on that project. And after that, business analysts can work with the users to have the user testing implemented, user acceptance testing, and then after that it's implementation. And business analysts can be involved with every piece of documentation that's coming out of the project. Maybe technical documents, yes, they come from the developers, but every other documentation like testing plan, testing strategy, they work very closely with the project managers, help them out to get those documents developed, because PM alone cannot do this without the help of business analysts on any project. So the one way to, and the other benefit of being a business analyst is they get more exposure to project management than anyone else on the project. Developers do not get that exposure. They talk to multiple groups, teams associated with the project, multiple user groups, and they get very good at communication, and they get exposed to the project management processes, documents, and that paves their way to grow like a senior, a lead business analyst, and eventually into project management. They can be a very good project manager because they know what needs to be done on a project, because they are there end to end, right from the beginning all the way to the implementation. And even after implementation, actually they are key for the maintenance and operations phase, because they are the ones to know how the system needs to be maintained and operated. And change requests, change management, they play a very key role in there. So business analysis paves your career path into multiple different areas. Actually, it's not just project management. You can be a program manager in your department because you get to know the policy, the processes so very well that you can be a program manager in your departments. So there are many ways that business analysis is going to help, and that is why we are here to promote and encourage people to make that as their career. Thank you.
I think we just heard the Business Analysis Manifesto right there. Well done, well done. We could take, I want to get both presentations in. That was a lot to absorb just now, and I don't want to lose any immediate questions you may have. So before, anybody want to throw a question at Deepa right away before Tim gets in? Anybody? I mean, Deepa said about how the business analyst is very exposed to the end-to-end of the project. Has that been your experience, people here on the end-to-end? And do you find yourself then wanting to stay and become more advanced as the analyst, or do you want to immediately jump in and become project managers or developers or something else? What? Please.
In project management, who owns the responsibility of involving the business analyst? Because obviously we have project managers, right? They know the ins and outs of the project and when the business analyst should get involved. So who is it triggered, like solely the project manager's responsibility to do that?
Okay, did everybody hear the question? Back? Okay. So let me see if I can do your question justice. Who is responsible for ensuring the participation of the business analysts on the project? Is it the project manager's responsibility or somebody else? Is that a
Yes.
I'm going to open it to both of you. So sure.
Maybe I should ask a question to answer your question. When do you think a project manager's responsibility starts or role starts on a project?
Before the planning stage, right, at the chartering.
May not be. Sometimes the PM comes after the RFO is released, and the vendor comes in, the vendor PM comes in and takes on from there. But the project activity starts way before. That's FSR. And whoever is initiating the project, whether it's a project director, project sponsor, they all should make sure that the business analysts from the department are involved from that phase on, because you may not have a PM at that time. A PM may not have been identified at that time. So the analysts are the one who actually start this process from the FSR phase. The concept or the idea can be anyone's, but to bring that into fruition, you have the business analyst to start the process. And that's where, and it's the department should be aware of this. The project sponsors and the project director who is initiating the project should make them involved right from the beginning.
Tim?
I think you heard it. It's a joint accountability and responsibility as you look at what are the successful project elements. Having both a business domain expertise, which we refer to as a subject matter expert at the beginning of the project, and having ownership is important, but also having other types of business analyst skills, like IT business analyst skills, people that can use their techniques to bridge the gap between the solution that's being built from a technology standpoint and what's supposed to be delivered for the business results. So I think it's important to have both those roles, but it's a joint responsibility. And if you go into a project and that role's missing, then you should stop and get those roles filled, because without those roles, you're already on the path of no return. So it's a joint accountability.
May I add something, just an observation? in the absence of having a BA and the project getting started, somebody needs to do the work. And just from my personal experience, as you were mentioning some of the things that analysts do, my role today is a project manager, but I've done a couple of FSRs, stage one, done some requirements, finishing a couple of RFOs. I have to fill in that gap. I have the skills from previous experience, but I just happen to have that. But in the absence, you have a project manager without the skills. What do you do? I mean, other than stopping the project?
So here's the thing. If, as a project manager, if you're doing the work, you're not managing the project.
I'm doing both, in this case.
So can you be in the projects, if a jack of all trade leads to a master of none. So we really have to have definitive roles to be successful. And that's part of the sponsorship and the people that want success to the project to make sure those roles are filled and make sure those roles are defined and filled and dedicated. One of the things when you put an FSR in, one of the things that they do a good job at the technology agency is defining, do you have these roles filled? Are you not splitting the baby? Because they know that is one of the failure rates as lessons learned, when you have someone trying to do both roles and then they're not done effectively. So it's very important that these roles are defined up front and filled up front, and don't get into initiation execution without that happening. You heard the gentleman say today, you have to have some disobedience and be able to tell your sponsors, hey, we can't move forward unless these roles are there. If we do, here's the results of what's going to happen. So if you're playing both roles, that's a very short-lived life, because that's going to end up, the larger the project, the more failure you're going to have. I mean, just being honest with you.
And I have something to add to that. So defining the roles. What is the current situation where there are no business analysts? We are depending on SMEs. SMEs know the depth of a small part of the system. They don't know the length and breadth of the system. But because there are no business analysts, we are depending on SMEs. And for those areas where there are no SMEs, the requirements are at a very high level. And that's where there are more gaps. And where there are SMEs, they are well defined. So maybe to create those roles, I think the department should move forward with identifying the SMEs in the program areas and helping them to become the business analysts. And it's very easy for them to see the length and breadth of the system. They should just have a very high-level idea of what's the end-to-end process or the policy, what comes in, what goes out, what's the overall purpose of that program. Not just being in the details all the time. They should just move a little bit high level, and they can be the best business analysts that you can have in your team.
So we just made a distinction then between the subject matter expert and the business analyst. And I want to make note of that. We're going to talk about that some more. I want to let Tim launch off now, because I think I can just sense there's 4 or 5 major ideas that he's going to want to share with us. And I think we're going to have a chance to talk some more about this distinction between the subject matter expert and the analyst as we go along.
How many of you, when they start a project, you bring in a consultant firm? I mean, probably majority of you, right? Bring in a consultant firm. What are they bringing in? What does a consultant have that you don't have as an IT or a business analyst? They have a set of skills that they've learned, and they've learned how to be an analyst. There is no one course that you can take to become a good business analyst. It's a series of skill sets that you have to obtain. You have to learn to be a facilitator. You have to learn to be able to do good requirement management. You have to be able to negotiate. You have to basically bridge the gap between the business and IT. You have to understand enough about what the business does, and you have to know enough about what the solution is going to provide, and you have to bridge that gap. That's a very unique skill. And why don't we have that in the state of California? Any ideas? Because that don't sound like a real sexy job, right? I don't get to build a cool website and everyone, or the developer or the project management role that's standing up there for the awards and stuff, right? To be a good business analyst, you got to grind it out. It's a tough job. I would say it's one of the toughest jobs in the industry. And it's a lost skill set that we have today. And it's something that if we're going to get back to being successful, we need to focus on developing this core competency in the state of California. And it's going to be tough. How many organizations out here have a PMO? Can I see a share of hands? Have your own office PMO?
You have your own project management office?
How many of you have a stable of business analysts that's what they do? They don't have a side job, they don't have a night job, that is their job. Anybody? So I would challenge all organizations as you build a PMO, how can you build a PMO without that core competency called business analyst? When the big firms come in, when they bring a project manager, they bring business analysts with them. So without those two roles tied at the hip, there's not going to be a lot of success. So as you build your PMOs, you also have to focus on the project management skill set, but also that business analyst skill set, because they go hand in hand. So it's really important that you distinguish between not using, I've done this a couple times and in different ways. You can build business analyst core competencies differently. About 10 years ago, as a CTO for CalPERS, we put together a re-engineering team, and we pulled people out of the various lines of business, and we built an area, and all they were, we called them IT business analysts. And we retrained them up. We sent them through a series of micro-hammer courses. We invested in them, but we picked the characteristics that they already had. They knew the subject matter experts. They were good communicators. They were good. They had A&A, attribute and attitude for this type of work. I've watched the success of these people right here at the table right here at DWR, and I can't take credit for this because when I got to DWR, it was already there. They built a team of business analysts around SAP, so around the horizontal business, so they understand the business and how SAP modulars apply to the business, and they work directly with the business. And then they translate that information and what needs to be done on both the front side and the back side, and they correlate all of that. So they do a good job of that. So they didn't raise their hands earlier, so I'm calling them on the table. So I think I don't really there's no magic bullet, but I think we need to focus back on that core competency, and it's hard because it's hard to build. We're in the process right now at DWR trying to expand the SAP analysts into some more IT business analysts. And in the California Natural Resource Agency, we have an IT portfolio of about 350 active projects right now. And one of the things we lack is the business analyst skills. And we pay dearly for that from the dollar standpoint. Because we pay a lot of money. We bring in consultant firms to do it. And I bet you most of you guys pay somebody to write your FSRs, right? I mean, you won't admit it. Well, Carlos left. You can admit it now. But basically, you do that. But that's what we heard here is don't do that. Start that process up front, because that's where the understanding level of what you're trying to achieve is. Own it, live it, and deliver it. So any questions? I mean, I don't want to get up here and sound like Billy Graham.
Pretty good invitation.
Could you talk about what some of the core competencies that you identify for business analysts?
I'll start and then let you add to it. I think the core competencies is somebody that is a good facilitator, has good communication skills, and also good listening skills. The ability to be able to take information in, break it down, and then basically be able to articulate it in a simple way for different audiences. A good business analyst has to do what I call is shapeshift. You have to be able to take the same set of information and basically deliver it back to certain audiences like exec in one mannerisms. You have to be able to deliver a set of technology deliverables to your program areas. You have to be able to talk to your programmers, the project managers. So you have to be able to take the same set of information and message it differently, because you have to communicate to that audience of what they need. So facilitation, negotiation, communication skills, process engineering, core competencies, the ability to understand the process. Your biggest job as a business analyst is not the technology side of the house. Not to figure out what is the best technology, but to figure out what is the process and how can that process be improved and what is the end result of that process, and then how do we measure that. So process engineering skill sets, requirement management. Can you take and facilitate? How many times when you've been in, when you have a JAD session, most people, they go into a JAD session and the users say, I want this, right? And then the JAD sessions turn into design sessions. Big mistake. Because then you missed all the requirements. You have to focus on the what, not the how, real early. So those are kind of the skill sets I think that are important. That and the ability to, make sure that you're not afraid, you have some tenacity, You can give the good, the bad, and the ugly to everyone up and down the food chain. And if you don't, so those are kind of the characteristics I think are important.
Yeah, two more things to add to what Tim said. Conflict management. That's a big issue. Sometimes when you're in a chat session dealing with multiple users, you can have conflicting requirements. How do you convince the users to agree upon one requirement that will be useful for all of them? And that is the key to a successful chat session. So I think the business analyst should be aware of the potential conflicts that might arise in a session and drive the session towards being successful. That's the key requirement actually for a business analyst to be successful. And some added values are knowing the IT side of it, like SQL statements, knowing about the databases, how relational databases work. Very high level, don't have to go deep, but a very high level idea of where the developers are coming from, to be able to understand the developers' language, because business analysts most of the time are liaisons between the users and the developers. So they should be able to translate the business requirements to the system requirements, and the developers should be able to understand that to implement the system. So they should be able to talk both languages. So added values are definitely IT skill sets, not very deep, like SQL. SQL is pretty easy for anyone to learn. It's plain English. And how relational databases work, and how the design sessions are usually held, and a little bit insight into the standards of the organization, the IT standards of the organization, that will definitely help the business analysts converse with the developers rather than looking like they don't know anything about the IT. That's it.
Let me throw a question at both of you. Having been on both sides on this, is as a colleague, a fellow state employee, somebody you see in the lunchroom or you worked with in an organization sometime before, that person's now the business analyst coming in, running a JAD session. You know the foibles of this person. You know this person directly day to day. This person is now coming in and trying to capture this information from you and feed it back to you. Sometimes the argument is that you need the outsider who's the unknown, if you will, and who's viewed as maybe being neutral, or if they're from out of town, they're obviously smarter, right? If you've never seen them before, there's a mystique around it. I mean, that's the mystique, right? I mean, that's the advantage the contractor gets over the in-house person. How do you overcome that familiarity, if you will, to be trusted to know how to do this process?
I think that's the difference between a subject matter expert and a dedicated, what we call IT business analyst, because the job of the business analyst is just that. They're not ingrained back into the business. So their job is to look at things as an outsider, even though they're part of your organization. So the benefit of having them not be part of the process ownership and apply those core competencies is very important, much as like you would hire someone from your company to do. But the benefit is they understand the culture of the organization that they're looking into. And let's face it, if you don't understand the corporate culture of someplace, you're not going to be very successful, and you're going to be just pushing that rock up a hill. So that's a benefit to have it. But again, you have to delineate. They have to be dedicated, and that has to be their full-time job. They cannot be ingrained in another part of the organization. And I think that's how you neutralize that and get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So you have that, it may be a disadvantage to be known as already being part of the organization, but the advantage is you know a lot about the organization. We were talking some the other day. I said frustration as the outsider coming in from a company, as I say, you have a limited amount of time to do the business analysis on the project. And I was sharing with Tim, I think it takes 9 months to learn an organization well enough to do the specifications. And if you have a 14-month project time frame, and as the consultant, you've got 4 months to get all the specifications done, how do you learn 9 months worth of duration in 4 months? And the answer is you don't. And having people who come from within the organization, you've already been there, you know it, and so you can add so much more value that over what the outsider can do. But, any other questions or comments out here?
So where do you think that organization should reside if you build an internal business analyst group? Anybody? Where should it reside in your organization? Now, I know state employees have an opinion because I've been to some of those union meetings.
Well, if an organization has a PMO, I would say the PMO.
Okay.
But it could be anywhere in the organization, because every organization has different functions they have to fulfill. So I say every section in an organization could have a business analyst.
And
To bridge the gap.
in the ESI training that I went to, they said that business analysts can exist in different groups or units as well inside of an organizational structure. So that means that, like we're SAP, but they could be underneath other architectural areas as well. So depending on the need.
Is there a right answer?
No. I think it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish and where your organization will accept these people the most. A lot of times if you put certain functions inside your IT organization, they're not accepted as well by the business people because they think it's got alternative motives. So it depends on, the relationships and how things are thought about within your own organizations. I was just curious because if anybody came with a good idea, I was going to steal it.
Well, if I could add a comment, it sounds like the skill sets really are at the root of it, because whether they're in an IT organization or on the program side, if they have those facilitating, communicating, negotiating skills, they can draw and gather all the information, all the requirements they need, whether they're on this side of the culture or that side of the culture. But it sounds like really ultimately, preferably, internal resources are the best, not to get a vendor or somebody from the outside who knows nothing about your department, nothing about your culture. You've already got someone who's within, whether they're IT or program, as long as they have those core competency skills and can draw everything they need and document and talk the programmer's language and talk the program's language and really build that trust, that bridge you talked about. That's what I'm hearing.
That's exactly right. And this is my personal opinion again. I would like to see the departments encourage the program analysts and the policy analysts to become the business analysts of the organization, because for any IT solution in any department, the requirements are coming from these areas. The business drives IT solutions and IT requirements. IT doesn't create the requirements without the business. So the business analyst should come from that area to start with, and then if they can work with the IT business analysts to get to this IT solution, I think that is definitely a good mixture of analysts in there. And IT can have their own business analysts, or they can always contract out, because they anyways do that for the IT solutions. But definitely the need is here for the program analysts and the policy analysts. And I think they should be more focused on the process that they follow in a day-to-day activity, and try to put it on paper, try to represent it in process models, diagrams. That's where the value comes from. It should not be in their minds. It should not be in someone's head. It should be on the paper. If they can depict what they are doing, we can start with the SME. And there are many SMEs in a particular functional unit in any organization. If each of them starts putting it down on paper, showing what they do as process models, and if someone can just connect all of them and make a larger process model, that's your end-to-end process. And that's from the business side. And if you need an IT solution in the future, and if you are handing this over to the IT business analysts, their work becomes so easy, and you will have a very good system developed, because the knowledge is actually coming from the business users, rather than orally or verbally giving out the requirements in the JAT sessions or during the RFP phase, that's how it happens most of the time. You meet in a meeting room and everyone starts talking and someone takes the notes. So that is one way of doing it, but if you have a process model in hand at that time, that speaks a lot. And things get much easier when you're looking for an IT solution.
How many of you have prepared business process models before? Okay, so kind of as an analytical technique, right? Okay, good. How did you learn? Is it course or trial by fire? Trial.
Education on the job. Also, as far as others, my peers. So, knowledge transfer, even consultants.
Each one teach one, and
Yeah. I had a chief engineer at the radio station when I was at my ops director there. It was very influential as far as helping me to understand modeling diagrams, blueprinting and designing and stuff like that.
Anybody else? How'd you learn to do your process modeling?
Just by doing them.
Just by doing.
Yeah, and they're very good at pinning people down on what your process is. You go into a room, you have 5 different people, they all think the process is different. I mean, I think we've probably all gone through that. So when you develop those, you pin them down and say, is this really how it works? And there are going to be some disagreement. But in the long run, they're very helpful to get people to decide really what this process is.
Yeah, you bring a good point. One of my pet peeves is that we all work from a narrative as analysts, and we need to be more visualized. We need to do visualization techniques, because when everybody sees something in a picture format, then they can relate to it. When you write something down, they're interpreting it internally. And you'll get more responses if you do more of these things through visualization techniques, whether it's process or whether it's even writing the requirement in and going around the room and doing a quick TED session on, is this what you think? So I think that's an important skill set also to achieve.
I used to work for a large medical company, Johnson & Johnson, and we would get people in a room and they would, everybody had a different idea on what the process is. But like you said, if you put it up there visually and you make everybody go, well, that's not really right or whatever, and you keep them in that room until we've all walked out of there agreeing on what it's supposed to look like, it's invaluable.
So you talked about building these, like a business model or an organizational model to enhance business analysts and IT business analysts. We're in the process right now at the California Natural Resource Agency, realizing we have such a large portfolio and these skill sets are really sacred. And we can't expect every department to build these core competencies. So we're going to build one agency kind of core competencies around IT business analysts and look for those skill sets. But in order to get that off the ground, we're going to have to do a hybrid model. We're going to have to start with bringing folks in, but then we're also going to have to seed it with some consultant skill sets to start off strong and teach the people that we recruit into those jobs. So we believe that'll be successful. And that model I've used before, like I said, about 10, 12 years ago, building from the ground up a model for PERS. And by the way, when you think the job's not sexy, I can tell you of those 10 people that started in that role and were picked for that job at PERS and did that job for 5 to 6 years, 3 of them are CIOs today in the state of California. One of them is a director for a department. So think about that when you think it's not a sexy job.
It's just hard work.
It's hard work.
And I would like to say one more thing. Please don't be thrown off by the term business process modeling. It's not rocket science, or it's not a book that you have to go through. It's not a huge concept that you have to learn or go for courses on it. It's very simple. It's a set of boxes, like in a Visio, if you have a square box in there, it's like those square boxes and arrows connecting those boxes, and you can come up with your own diagram. It could, and the diagram could be driven by the sequence of activities that you do in your day-to-day activities, or the sequence in which the different functional units connect to each other. You can start at a high level, or you can start at the low level. Both. You can go back up, or you can go down. Wherever you are in your organization, you can try to create that diagrams for yourself, for your own good. You don't have to tie it to the IT solutions. Every day-to-day activity can be represented pictorially that way.
they're easy to draw, they're hard to agree upon.
Yeah.
So you're here for a reason. Instead of just talking at you, we really would like to address any of the, things on your mind, because that's one of the reasons that we're here as panel members in this afternoon, is because this is a field we all believe in, and we feel there's a gap, and we want to, try to help organizations fill those gaps, because this is
And Tim's recruiting for his new resources agency.
He ain't lying.
Now, I have to go back to my earlier comment, and that is, when I got hired into it, it was, okay, we need to do this, and this. We're living in a world of limited resources. Just do it. Going back to your comment, Tim, of course, we can always push back and do whatever we need to do as professionals, but at the end of the day, once management makes a decision, this is what we have, these are the bad conditions, just go. To change the mindset of that, is there, like Carlos Ramos, anybody else kind of working with this vision to articulate that, yes, we need business analysts dedicated, and that's the direction?
I sat on the IT Executive Council with Carlos and other AIOs, and this has been a topic of discussion many times. And as Carlos looks to, I don't know if you guys know, but they mentioned a little bit this morning, in the governor's budget, there are positions for Carlos to start putting together a dedicated PMO office. And I know Carlos has talked about, and some of the people have talked about also putting in those business analyst skill sets in those areas. They've also started to try to bring some people in, and some of them are downstairs on that first table, so about some different competencies around testing and so forth. So even if you don't have them today, you can use them as an internal consulting, and if you need a skill set that you don't have, I would suggest going and talking to that group. You could address it through like Lisa Murphy in that group. And so they're trying to fill that. What you said about management decisions, I've done it as a CX, knowing that I didn't have the right resources, forced my project manager into being both roles, and every time when all said and was done, I regretted it. Not to say I might not do it again, but it is a lesson learned, and resources are scarce, but maybe that's where the business people, you can negotiate with them. Hey, give me a LT. Let me go recruit one of these people for the project and for the life of the project at least. So there's different ways to approach it.
Whenever I hear lack of resources or limited resources, whatever you want to say, I think of lack of commitment. You're not really committed. You don't have enough people to do the project, you're not committed. You're wasting everybody's time by saying we really need to do this project, but you have to do it with this one guy who's got to do everything.
I think it's a lack of prioritization more than a lack of commitment.
How important is it to you, right?
Well, and that gets back to the sponsorship question you heard today. I mean, and it's hard in some departments. If you're a department that has a single line of business, kind of a single mission, then usually the enterprise decisions can be made, in a kind of a project portfolio priority. But if you're in a business where they have multiple lines of business, I'll take DWR for instance. DWR has multiple lines of business. They have the water delivery system, and then they have the environmental scientists. And sometimes those projects are 180. And you have different, and sometimes you have different deputy directors, right? And they have their own sources of money. So money becomes a priority decision, right? But you, as a business enabler, you only have a set amount of resources. So you really have to have some type of better enterprise governance, and it's very hard to get there. And I honestly don't know any department that is optimally doing that. I'll let you handle the rest of that.
One way to approach lack of resources is to actually plan for a state team on a project that's about to be started. Most of the time, because they don't have time, these ideas come up in the last minute and they start hurrying up to get to an IT solution. What they do, what most departments do is go for a vendor who can build the IT solution for them, bring up the system, and then they start planning for a state team to be on the project. And I think if they do that much before the vendor comes on board, and that's part of having the business analysts in the department, that's where your team starts. And then you have your own IT shop and you have developers in there, so you're involving both analysts and developers from the department on the project before the vendor comes on board. And if they work with the vendor and they are involved in the mix, of developing the requirements and developing the system, I think we can tackle this issue of lack of resources. We may not have this.
And in the next panel, there's going to be some discussion of some techniques for doing exactly what Deep is talking about when Russ and Eric join in. Do you find that the not getting the business analysts involved may in part be because they don't already exist? There's not that designated person. But
That's kind of what I was going to ask. You said there's resources and they're looking to hire, but what are the classifications? Because we all work in the state, and there's these blanket positions, titles.
Sure.
That now the MQs are so, they're so strict that it's making it harder to get to that next level and to screen those individuals. And for us that are going for those classifications, what are they?
So what we're planning on using, and we've used in the past in other endeavors I've done, is the analyst series, like the associate, staff, and senior levels. And so that, because it is really more on the analytics side, the analytical side, and less on the deep dive technology side skill sets we want. So we also like that because it's a deep class, and we can kind of bring people in if they have the right attributes and attitudes. And if they have some of those basic characteristics, we can tool them up, and they can become, have a career path as an IT business analyst.
So you start, so the associate.
So we could start some at associate, some at staff, and some at senior, depending on the existing skill sets. It's like any other organizational structure. You want kind of a blend for retention reasons and so forth. But also you want to always have some succession in there. It's a very hard skill set to obtain, and you're going to put, as an organization, to do it right, you're going to put an investment in there. So you want to make sure that the investment is long-lived. So.
Tim, is that the Information Systems Analyst Series? Is
Yes.
that what you're referring to?
Yes, the information series, the ISA series,
So the challenge is, if you're sitting as an associate governmental program analyst and you're learning on the job, how do you get into that ISA series?
Oh, okay.
Which makes it, it makes
So let me back up now that I understand your question a little better. It doesn't have to be one classification structure, because the different roles, you can mix, we've done this before, where you can mix some ISA series as well as some AGPs. It depends. It doesn't have to be one set of classifications. So it depends on what they're going to do and how you're going to blend those roles.
And based on my experience, there has departments who have used HPA or research special in the past because of that. So it all depends on the organization's structure. They go about supporting people.
I like to use the IS series because I think, honestly, it gives the people an upward mobility path. It's very hard, so, as you know, as an AGP, to go to the next level, which is basically management. So, this gives you a chance to build that center of excellence and give the people something back. Because, any good organization change is about also, what's in it for them. If they're going to dedicate to this role, then you should be able to give them something back for a future career.
I wanted to slip a plug in, because you're asking about where the CTA view on all this is that CTA did bring in UC Davis Extension's Business Analysis Certification Program. They streamlined it a little bit, and they recently completed the series of, I think it's 2 or 3 weeks of training programs, and there's at least 20 people that went through it and got a certification from it from several departments. And I think the success of that effort is going to lead to CTA bringing UC Davis back in again. So the trick's going to be for you and your department to find out about when that next set of courses is going to be offered, and to see if your department can put forth the training money to enable you or somebody from your department to go through that training program. And that's going to increasingly create a core of business analysts throughout the state who've gone through the same formal training program.
It's more art than science. Just remember, I think this role is more art than science.
When you're talking about making a shift from a program analyst over to the ISA series, how, because this is something I'm struggling with, is having a foundation of the being able to speak the language in terms of IT architecture. Like I have a business degree, but I don't know a server from a waiter type of thing. So, other than just hanging around it a lot, what tools do you have to sort of earn the respect of developers so that when you're in those JAD sessions, you can say, okay, let's hang on, let's not talk about the how, let's stick with the what. They want to jump to talking code really quick. I want to be able to earn their respect by knowing the architecture better. What tools would you suggest, other than just being around it for years?
What, why?
I think you don't need to know the details of the architecture, but you need to know what developers go through to develop a solution. What are all the areas of the system they touch? Databases is one.
Pizza will be ready in an hour.
That was our timer.
So you just need to know it from a very high level. And database is a very important one there because you are translating your business information into systems information, and you need to know how the information is getting stored. That's why that plays a very important role. And business analyst needs to be part of the database design sessions for that reason, because they need to know how the information is getting stored in the system and how it is coming out of it. So just some little details here and there, but you don't need to know the depth of. You can be a developer if you're knowing all those details. You don't have to be a business analyst.
I kind of disagree, because I feel like you're often asked, the system development life cycle. You're all asked if you participated in these JAD sessions and things like that, and business requirements. What's the functional requirements? I mean, you're asked to speak to that, and a lot of these interviews, you're asked to write statement of qualifications. You have to really specify what you've done to even get past the gate. So you have to do some kind of training.
So I think the state has to relook at this concept of IT business analyst, because it is a combination set of characteristics and skills, and it's a blend, and that's the difference. And so, you struggle with that because there is no one perfect classification. And unfortunately, right now we've settled on the information systems analyst series, because that's the one that kind of is the closest to. And you asked about, how do I get their respect? You deliver, and that doesn't mean you have to deliver in their terms. You have to be, So I think it's a combination skill sets. But if you're talking about, each organization may blend it. I have an IT, at the agency level, I have an IT customer relations manager. And his whole role is just to interpret it between the customers and IT. And so that works wonders. And he didn't come from IT originally. He came from the Energy Commission, and he understood energy. But I think the dilemma you're pointing out is a dilemma as a state we need to address it. Where do we take this, center of excellence? How do we put a classification around it? How do we make sure that the right attributes are obtainable? And it's going to be tough.
And one of the things is that if you go to the state website, you will see more staff information system analysts than you'll see associate analysts.
Yes.
So they're taking you in straight from that level, and they're not operating that entry level. So then
There is even an.
He doesn't have any IS background, and I'm not going to hire him for an IS position. That's easy to say. You can do that.
There is even an assistant ISA position in there, and then comes associate. So you have assistant, associate, staff, and senior. But one suggestion would be to work with your workforce planning development office to identify courses for IT business analysts specifically, so they know what exactly they need to know to work on an IT project. What is the information that they need to know? And I remember seeing these courses in my past experiences. There are these courses being offered. So if the Workforce Planning Development Office can offer that for you all, I think that will give you an idea of what you need to know to work on an IT project.
The bottom line is, with your organization willing to commit to cultivating an in-house center of excellence around business analyst activity. Because if that will isn't there, it's not going to happen. So if the organization they have to understand that value and really see. Because, I mean, there's all kinds of mechanisms. T&Ds, you can do a training and development assignment to take someone that has those attributes and attitudes, get them that experience so now they qualify. So it's really a matter of conveying the value proposition back to your organizational leaders. And the way you do that is one day just ask them to pull all the contracts they have and how many people how much are they paying for these skill sets today, over and over. And then the other gentleman that said about resources, one way to minimize resource drain is don't make somebody do two jobs. If I have a core competency group and all they are business analysts that can be matrixed out to projects, this one business analyst might be able to be doing two projects versus you taking someone from the business area, having them do their day job of processing, accounts payable and also operating as the business analyst on the project. So this is also beneficial in how you can manage your resources more effectively, but you have to paint that picture. And that's another skill set for the business analyst. How do you always talk in terms of business value? Return on value. Not always return on investment, but return on value.
All right. I want to thank our two presenters here, Deepa and Tim, and let's give a big round of thank you for these folks. All right. And I'm glad we got this business analysis manifesto on tape. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you want to stand up and stretch for a moment, I'm not going to give you a chance to leave the room, however.